Mrs. Kennedy, and the crowd yells, "And the President of the United States." And I can see his suntan all the way from here. Shaking hands now with the Dallas people, Governor and Mrs. Connally. Governor Connally on your left. And the President waves goodbye, waits for his wife, and back they go to the car.
The first portion of this program.
Here is a bulletin from CBS News. Further details on an assassination attempt against President Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. President Kennedy was shot as he drove from Dallas Airport to downtown Dallas. Governor Connally of Texas in the car with him was also shot. It is reported that 3 bullets rang out. A Secret Service man was heard to shout from the car, "He's dead." Whether he referred to President Kennedy or not is not yet known. The president, cradled in the arms of his wife, Mrs. Kennedy, was carried to an ambulance and the car rushed to Parkland Hospital outside Dallas. The president was taken to an emergency room in the hospital. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.
On November 22nd, 1963, President John F. Kennedy is shot and killed while riding in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas. Kennedy's murder shocked the nation to its core. The nation grieved its fallen leader and mourned with Jackie and their 2 children. Some say the innocence of the American people and the optimism of the 1960s died that day with Kennedy in Dallas. His alleged killer, Lee Harvey Oswald, himself was shot and killed just days after Kennedy's death. And conspiracy theories on who killed Kennedy and why still persist today. With the Cold War, social reform, and progress in the civil rights movement in jeopardy, the nation would now turn to a dramatically different man in office. That man was sworn in as President of the United States aboard Air Force One just hours after Kennedy's death. His name was Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Lyndon Johnson was a master party politician. LBJ was a New Deal Democrat from Texas. Johnson was mentored by FDR himself and knew how to make deals to pass laws in Congress. He was known as an activist president who expanded presidential power. No president had extended the role of the federal government like him since FDR. Johnson's goal was to improve various parts of American society in JFK's memory. Johnson proposed his plan, and he called it the Great Society. Improvements needed to be made in poverty, the environment, immigration, education, urban housing, and healthcare.
The first step of Johnson's Great Society was declaring a war on poverty.
And this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
Johnson believed that alleviating the problems of poverty and helping the poor would boost the economy and create a stronger workforce. To help achieve this goal, Johnson signs the Economic Opportunity Act in 1964. This law provided $1 billion in programs focused on job creation and education for poor Americans. Also in 1964, Johnson signs the Tax Reduction Act. This law cut taxes on companies and personal income taxes on consumers by $10 billion. It helped lead to job creation and greater income for the poor. Johnson also reformed healthcare by creating Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare and Medicaid were programs that were embedded into the Social Security system that provided low-cost health insurance for the elderly and the poor. This is important because Medicare is an incredibly popular program used by millions of Americans today. Johnson also sponsored a massive increase in educational funding. He established the Head Start program, which provides free preschool to American children, and he also signed the Elementary and Secondary School Act. These programs, which are still in place today and help you as students, fund college scholarships, buy high school textbooks, fund special education programs, preschools, and also provide the Public Broadcasting Service, also known as PBS. PBS was intended to bring educational programs home to children who are watching television. These shows help children learn how to count and how to read. If you watched Sesame Street growing up, you watched PBS.
Here, and then you go around here like that, and then back here.
Hoping to fight discrimination, LBJ signed the Immigration Act of 1965. This act ended quotas based on nationality that had been set since the early 1900s. Johnson also aimed to help poor and middle-class Americans afford homes. He funded programs to build low-rent public housing for urban poor families. Johnson also created the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This new department to the presidential cabinet would oversee federal housing programs. LBJ was the first president since Teddy Roosevelt to work on environmental protection. Pollution was destroying America's natural wonders and threatening the well-being of its citizens. LBJ signs the Water Quality Act of 1965. This law requires states to clean their rivers. Johnson also signs the Air Quality Act of 1967. This law set air pollution guidelines and let the federal government enforce car emissions standards.
During the Johnson years, the liberal activism of the 1960s also swept through the Supreme Court. Headed by Chief Justice Earl Warren, the Warren Court decided monumental cases that sought to protect the constitutional rights of those accused of crimes. There are two decisions of the Warren Court that protect your rights if you are accused of a crime today. The first is Gideon versus Wainwright. In 1963, the Warren Court ruled that the court system must provide a lawyer to the accused if they cannot afford one themselves. The second is Miranda versus Arizona. In 1966, the Warren Court ruled that every accused person must be read their constitutional rights to representation before they can be questioned by police. These are known as your Miranda rights. Whenever someone accused of a crime is arrested, you will hear the police read you your Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. This is to remind you of your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. This is to remind you of your right to representation, as guaranteed in the Gideon versus Wainwright decision.
Under President Johnson, the power of the federal government had been expanded like never before. Along with that, deficit spending grew and a conservative backlash began, leading to the rise of conservative politicians like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. But LBJ's war on poverty worked. The poverty rate was cut in half between 1962 and 1973. The rights of the accused were better protected by law. The Warren Court rulings guaranteed rights for those innocent until proven guilty.
The Great Society rests on abundance and liberty for all. It demands an end to poverty and racial injustice, to which we're totally committed in our time.